Hi, welcome everyone. I think we've just gone live. Give it a few. There we are. Yeah, I think we've gone. Hello and welcome, students and graduates of University of Leeds, to this webinar, Starting Your Career. And thank you for joining. I am Sydney. I am the current graduate intern working at the Careers Service at the moment. And I just want to do some housekeeping before we start this webinar. I'll be hosting today, and before I just bring on the speaker, just want to go through some notes. So I just want to remind everyone this webinar is being recorded today. So if you need to leave or join late, that's fine. The recording will be shared with everyone over the next couple of days, along with some useful links of how you can use the career service here. I want to thank everyone who's submitted some pre-submitted questions, and we'll be covering as many questions as we can towards the end of the webinar. We really encourage everyone to submit questions throughout if you can, to make sure you can do this okay, because we're hosting over YouTube today. Just make sure that you're signed in with a Google account. Pop any questions you have in throughout, and we'll try to get to them towards the end in the Q&A. Brilliant. Yeah, so without further ado then, we'll start right on time. I want to introduce our speaker today, Catriona Pitkethly. She was a 2004 Leeds graduate, and she's now the executive coach and people professional. So yeah, how are you today, Catriona?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Sydney. Really excited to be here.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, I'll hand over to you then. I'm looking forward to hear.
Thanks, Sydney. Before I kick off, I just wanted to introduce a question to you all to get you kind of positioned in the mood for this session and to help me understand a little bit more about you guys. So I'm going to ask our colleagues at Leeds to bring up the link and the details of our Slido. And what I'd like you to think about is just how you're feeling currently about the next 6 to 12 months. How are you feeling about starting or restarting, in some people's cases, your career? What's going on in your head? What's going on in your heart? How are you feeling? Put either a word or a phrase into the Slido, and then it will give me a sense, as well as your fellow graduates, of how everyone's feeling at this point in time. So you can start doing that now. And while you're doing that, I'll just introduce myself a little bit more. So as Sydney said, I graduated, feels like a very long time ago, in 2004. And since then, I've done a lot of work in the HR, learning, career, and coaching space. So what I'd like to do today is just bring some of that experience and insight to you. It's something that I probably would have loved when I graduated. I don't mind admitting that I struggled for those first few years after graduation, which is why I feel so passionate about being here today, talking to you about things that I've learned, not just from that experience, but also from all these years of working with graduates, leaders in corporate environments, hiring graduates, hiring other lateral hires as well. And I've tried to distill that into sort of 5 key areas for you today so that you can remember and take away. So if we go back to the word cloud, let's see what's coming in from you all about how you're feeling at the moment. So I was hoping excited would be in there, so I'm glad it is. Nervous, also not surprised about that. Overwhelm and anxiety, absolutely can relate to a lot of those feelings as well. But glad there's some positive stuff in there about looking forward. Confused, yeah, absolutely. I think I felt confused. I still feel confused, if I'm honest, but I can imagine options at the moment can be quite overwhelming, and there's a lot to think about, and probably a lot more choice today than there ever was before. And that's not always an easy thing to navigate. It can be an exciting thing, but it can also give us a bit of analysis paralysis. So thanks for sharing those words. It's good for each other, I think, to understand that you're probably not on your own in how you're feeling. And I think that's one of the best things about having a cohort around you, other graduates in a similar position. You can talk to each other about how you're feeling, and make sure you do, and other people in your life as well. There's nothing worse than feeling isolated and on your own. So I do encourage you to talk to each other about your experiences, but people that have already graduated, for example, like me, which is why I'm here. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story before we kind of go into the lessons learned, because a lot of it does feed into some of those lessons that I'm going to talk to you about. And my story can be very much summarized by that figure on the left. trying something, failing at that thing and learning from it, trying something else, that going wrong, what have I learned from it? It can be a painful cycle, I'm not going to lie, but it's one of the best things that you can do in life, whether that's career or personal life, to learn from your experiences. So the way that I'm going to tell my story is a little bit about from where I was very sure of myself and how those kind of trial and errors have worked out along the way. So the first thing I wanted to be was a world famous actor. From the age of 5, I was pretty certain that was what I wanted to do. So I did a lot of dancing and music, studied drama at GCSE, loved it. And then A-levels hit, and I found A-levels very difficult. And I did theatre studies and hated it. So I had to go through the hard decision of halfway through my A-levels to give it up and just focus on the other 3 that I had. One of which was English literature. So I thought, I'm okay. If I study English literature, a lot of people go down that route into the acting profession, no problem. But then I got a really bad grade for my English literature A-level, and that was what my offer was conditional on, to go to Leeds. And I was adamant I wanted to go to Leeds. I'd been there, I'd visited, I thought it was great. I loved it. From the moment I set foot on campus, I knew that was where I wanted to be. However, I didn't have the grades to get into the degree that I wanted to at the time, which was English and French. So I had to do some soul searching and some pivoting, go through clearing, figure out what I wanted to do. And I thought, the French is fine, I'll continue with that. What else could be useful? Let me try something businessy. So I picked management studies. I thought that'll be a clever choice to have for my career. So I had a year then to figure out what I wanted to do. So I had a year off in between finishing school and then going to university with my unconditional offer at that point. So I thought, well, if I'm studying French and management, why don't I try to do some stuff that relates to those areas? So I worked as a manager in retail for 6 months of that year. And then I decided to go and live on a campsite in France for the other 6 months of that year. In a management role. So I thought I was very clever about doing something that related to my degree. If you knew me at the time, you would have laughed at the thought of me living in a tent for 6 months, and my family and friends certainly did. I was not an outdoorsy person. I was certainly not a camping person. And I could barely, boil an egg, let alone cook for other people in my team. So it was quite the experience. And through that experience, I think through the induction and the orientation, it became clear to my management team that I wasn't really ready for that management role and managing a campsite. So one of the first things I had to experience there was a bit of a demotion, which, as you can imagine, hit my confidence somewhat. But in hindsight, it was one of the best things that happened to me, because it meant that I then got to work on a different campsite, which was by the sea, with lots of great people. It was really big. It had 5 stars. So I had a much better experience, I think, as a result of that demotion than I would have had if I'd followed the original path. So that was a great experience and really prepared me for university. So when I got to Leeds in that September to study, I knew how to cook, I knew how to clean, I knew how to cook for 12 people on my floor. So it was kind of funny to watch my peers and my fellow students struggling with some of that stuff. And for me, I was just so ready for it, and I absolutely loved it and had a great time. So that's probably the one part of this story that isn't an error at all, is that choice to go to Leeds and study for 3 years, and then having a year abroad as well, as part of the French degree. Obviously, as part of that, I did have to go to France, so another bit of travel. I also spent a summer in New York as a piano player for a summer camp of kids, which was another interesting experience. Just tried to make the most of being a student, really, and having all those opportunities. When I came to graduating, I was absolutely certain that I did not want to go onto a graduate program. I had no idea what attracted my fellow graduates to graduate programs. They all sounded boring to me. And because I had this travel bug now, I knew that I wanted to go and do something else outside of the UK. So I joined an organisation called ISEC. I'm not sure if that's still available in Leeds, but I joined it through Leeds. And what they do is they offer internships around the world for different areas. And at the time, I was going to do a management internship to link to my degree. So that was my plan, and I knew I didn't want to go straight away. So I moved home, did some temp jobs to save up some money, and waited for the kind of perfect internship to come up through this ISEC program. What happened though was that I went to see a movie in the October, I remember it very clearly, which was called The Motorcycle Diaries. If you don't know what that's about, it's a story of Che Guevara when he finished his medical studies, going on a road trip, a motorcycle trip around the South America. Something happened inside me watching that film, something lit me up, and that was it. I knew that I wanted to save the world. Business was out, development was in, and I wanted to do some good and give back. I just suddenly knew that that was what I was put on this planet to do. So I changed all my search filters in the ISEC platform and put them to search for development internships in South America. Because I'd studied some Spanish at university alongside my French, I thought it was also a great idea to improve my language skills in that area. So I found one in Peru, which was starting the February after I graduated, so quite a while, and it was for 6 months. And I had the best 6 months of my life. Absolutely incredible, great experience, and I think really sort of has been a punctuation mark in my life and has helped me with where I kind of choices I make, and I have made since then. So after such a great experience volunteering with disabled children from the slums of Lima, I came back to London and thought, great, I now know what I'm here to do. I'll go work for charity and I'll start saving the world one job at a time. I wasn't alone in that thought, though, and actually the charity sector is quite competitive. So it was difficult to get a job. I did eventually get one, probably not in the area that I was keen on. It was in skills and learning, and it had a link to the government, so not saving babies, but I thought it was a good starting point. However, I tried a couple of those jobs in smaller charities and really struggled. I didn't enjoy working there. I found the politics of it quite difficult to navigate. Maybe I was a bit naive at the time around working life and how everyone was there for the same reasons. They're definitely not. So I sort of suffered what I call this quarter life crisis. I was in my early mid-20s. Suddenly thought the thing that I wanted to do just wasn't working for me, and where on earth do I go from here? So there was a lot of soul searching, and I would say that I probably crashed and burned, and I put in the brackets there for the first time because it's happened a few times since. Again, don't mind admitting that. But at that point, I had to just look at some of the career options that were there at the time, did some of those tests online, read some books, and tried to figure out what it was I was meant to do. All the tests pointed to me either being a nurse or going into HR. Now, I wasn't going to go and do nursing, that was for sure. That wasn't for me. I knew that. So I thought, right, let's try this HR gig. So I signed up with a few recruitment agencies who specialize in HR and got a job for the complete opposite kind of company from where I was in the charity sector, in a very successful, big, well-known law firm in the centre of London. So it's what I call moving from the light side of the charity sector to the dark side of the corporate world. You couldn't get more corporate than a law firm like that. But that was the best move I ever made, and I've never looked back since. I'm still in that area of work. I work in learning and development. That was my first job in learning and development. And it's just been brilliant. So in terms of that figure on the left there, trying, error, learn, that definitely describes my story. It's not going to be everyone's story, but I just want to let you know that having that kind of experience is not a bad thing. And as I said, it can feel painful at the time. And I look back and remember that pain, but I also look back and think about all the experiences I've had as a result of that, all the things that I've learned, the people that I've met, and what I've learned from them. And that's why I feel like today I can give you some of those insights to help you, not just now as you look at graduating and where you're going to go next. As some of you mentioned, you're a bit nervous about that, totally understandable. But things that I'd hope you remember sort of further on in life, in your career as well. These are messages that I give to professionals of all levels, so not just graduates, but leaders as well. So please do think about that as you move through your life and your career from here. So lesson number 1 that I'd like to talk to you about. This is a quote, actually, that my own coach reminded me of not very long ago, about comparison being the thief of joy. I mean, I know when I graduated and I was in that quarter life crisis, I was looking to my left, I was looking to my right. I saw my friends doing really well, getting promoted, earning good money. And there was me earning not very much money in the charity sector and feeling miserable. And I just couldn't understand, why was it working out for everyone else and not for me? And that was before social media was so big. And so I can only imagine what that comparison feels like at this point for you guys. But what I would say is, you're unique. We're all unique. We also don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So it's very easy to get sucked into looking at other people, seeing how successful people are, seeing how happy people are. And social media is, awful for that. We do obviously put up on social media the best part of our lives, the best part of ourselves. We don't often put the hard bits, the lessons learned, when we've fallen over, when we've had to pick ourselves back up. So that's the first thing I wanted to say to you in terms of you are coming out of a very structured environment where you've all been peers and equals. And here's where it gets messy. There's no structure from here. If you go into a graduate program, you'll probably have a certain degree of that. Otherwise, life is what you want to make it, which can be scary, but it's also very exciting. And it means that there are many options open to you. So this is where I say, don't compare yourself to others, but by all means, be inspired by other people. So if you can take from if you're looking around and seeing what everyone else is doing, take from that things that you think, oh, that might help me with a little bit more of that, or a little bit less of this, or why is that person doing so well? And use it as a learning experience rather than a way of bringing you down. And those of you that have mentioned the words about anxiety and overwhelm and nerves, I'm probably speaking to you more because you'll probably be more susceptible to these kinds of feelings. And I've definitely been that cat on the right there, feeling in a bit of a hole, actually, when I've looked around and compared myself to everyone else. So that's my first bit of advice. Please try and stop comparing yourself to the people around you. Speaking of unique, that's my second piece of advice, is around looking in the mirror and really getting to know yourself. I work with a lot of older leaders, shall we say, who have done very little of this in their lives, and they are completely oblivious to how they behave and therefore their impact on the people around them. And I would ask you as future leaders to start now. Everything that you do from this point out should be about getting to know yourself, getting to know your strengths, getting to know your weaknesses, what inspires you, what are you passionate about, what gets you up in the morning, what do you love spending time on, where time flies by, you've forgotten to eat or drink or look at your phone because you've just been in that brilliant state of flow. So what are those things? Do you know what they are now? If not, start thinking, start reflecting. And I would say not just what, but who. So the people around you will be very important to you. Do the people you spend a lot of time with lift you up, or do they bring you down? Do they inspire you? Are they the people that you find joy from if you do certain activities with them? So I definitely look at the what and the who. And a lot of people try and ask, they wait for someone else to help them discover who they are, whether that's in a job or their family. And I just say to that, it's really up to you. Other people will see you in a certain way. They're seeing you from their lens. It can be helpful, but make sure that you're using that information with your own self-reflection. And I think at this point in your career, it's easy to just do, take action. And I'm still that kind of person. I have to force myself to reflect. But the amount of insight and learning I've had from that reflection is just growing with time. So take a breath. Don't always just think about the do. Think about the why while you're doing the doing. Why am I doing this? Why is this working? Why am I enjoying it? think about all of those things as you look at jobs, you look at things that could, you're going to be spending a lot of time and a lot of hours at work. So this is a good chance when you're young and you're just starting in your career to think about the bits that you like, the bits that you don't like, and being honest with yourself about them. So that was my second piece of advice on learning as much as you can about yourself. The third one is fairly short and simple. It's probably, again, speaking from very personal experience, but it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not know what you want to do. As you saw before, I did not know what I want to do. Sometimes on days I still don't think I know what I want to do. And actually, what I would say to you, if that is you and you're worried about not knowing, that can actually be an asset to you, because you're not on a fixed path, you're not on a fixed mindset. So hopefully that means you're open and curious and willing to learn about what it is that you do want to do. So maybe that's an opportunity for you to try different things. If you don't try an experiment now when you're young, at the beginning of your career, trust me, it only gets harder to do that experimentation later. I've seen many people start a career because they thought it was what they wanted to do, or it's what their parents wanted them to do, maybe a family trait of being lawyers or doctors. I've seen this time and time again. And those people being miserable, some of them going to burnout, because they've pursued this career that they thought was meant for them. So it's some great stories there around people pivoting and changing career later in life. So some of you may be in that place where you're coming to study a bit later and you're retraining, and that's great too, because you've made those decisions and you probably feel a bit more in control of what's happening to you. So that's just my third very quick piece of advice around not knowing. And I think it's great to not know now, personally, not to take anything away from those. If you feel you know what you're doing and you're certain about your path, that's great, good for you. I'm very jealous because I never had that. But just also be open to the fact that if things don't work out the way you thought they might, or actually you find out that the reality of those careers and those jobs isn't what you thought, that's also okay, and that is really normal. And now more than ever, people are changing careers 2-3 times in their lifetime. So nothing's set in stone, nothing's forever. As I said before, try things out. I look at life and a career as a game made up of a series of experiments. So I would encourage you to do the same and think about these decisions as not life-changing and right or wrong. It's just a decision you make at a certain point in time to try something and see how it works for you. My fourth lesson is actually split into 2 parts. So I'll go with the first one on the right, which is something that actually I heard last week from our chief legal counsel in the company that I work in now. I invited him to come and speak to some new joiners in our induction event, and I asked him what his words of what advice would be to the new joiners in the room, and they were from all levels, leaders down to sort of entry level and grads. And he said, be nice and work hard. And it sounds really simple, it sounds really obvious, and it is simple and it is obvious. However, I cannot stress, maybe not less of the work hard, because I think people are generally tuned to do that nowadays. Work is hard, people work long hours. I think we all know that's reality. But it's the being nice that I wanted to really emphasize here. And what I mean by that is really look at your interpersonal skills. How easy are you to work with? I've been in numerous graduate assessment centers, hired people from, as I said, grads up to leaders. And in an interview process, what people want to see is that you would be a good colleague. You would be a good team player. So what does that look like? That looks like you are able to communicate with people, to facilitate discussion. Doesn't mean you're always leading and being the loudest in the room, by no means. It's about being that team player. And especially at a graduate level, they're looking for people that can come in, hit the ground running, have the right attitude, be open to learning, taking on tasks, and just being, as I said, easy to work with. And these are the skills that the robots and the machines will never have. the interpersonal skills is the human trait that we will always have working for us. So if you can start nailing some of those at the beginning of your career, it will set you so well up for leadership later on. I'm going to say that the technical skills that you might want at the beginning of your career are given, and I'm sure you'll get lots of training to get there, but it's the interpersonal that will set you apart as you start to go up the career ladder. So please remember that around what it is and what it takes to be a good candidate at interview, but also a good colleague when you get to being an employee. And then the lady on the left is around, I'm not expecting you all to be yoga teachers, but it's about the flexibility and the agility. So again, things change in the world constantly. Look at where we are now compared to 2-3 years ago. We never thought these kinds of things would happen, that we'd be working in these kinds of ways, and the impacts we'll be seeing for years to come. So we can never predict what's coming. We can never predict how the world of work is going to change. There are jobs that exist now that didn't exist 20 years ago. So if there's one thing that's constant, it's if you can be flexible, if you can pivot, if you can learn new skills, then you'll always be employable. So even in an entry-level job or a graduate job, if you're doing a graduate scheme, they'll expect you to move around and rotate into different functions. So you get that chance to be flexible quite early on. But for those of us who sort of stick in the one job, we need to be a bit more intentional about how we can just practice and also demonstrate that agility and that ability to learn. Think about the technology, how that's come on in the last few years. The companies that are around now that didn't exist 20-30 years ago. So that's what I would say about, being a good colleague, but also being agile and showing to the people around you that you can be agile and you can learn and you're open to it and you're not stuck in the kind of job you want to do or the skills that you want to practice. Be open to what the opportunities might be that come to you. And my final piece of advice, which I've sort of alluded to at the beginning with my story, is something that's quite close to my heart because I'm actually a perfectionist by nature. And it's taken me many years to manage this and work with this trait around failing and learning. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's been painful for me. But I see where I've learned from it. And I also see when I look at other people who have had this kind of attitude of just trying something, jumping in and learning from it from a young age, it's amazing to see how far they get. And if you think about some of the bravest, most successful people out there in the public domain, they've all failed in some way, in many ways. Often the best entrepreneurs have been bankrupted, have gone bust many times, and they pick themselves back up again and throw themselves back into it and get even stronger and get even more successful. So failing is a great opportunity. As I said, it's painful at the time, it can be, but if you can learn to sort of lean into that pain, it will feel less painful every time you do it. And if you can't fail now at the beginning of your career when you're young and you are more resilient, trust me, it's going to feel very, very difficult to do that later in life. And I think that's why I fell into my quarter life crisis, because, school came easy to me. I was good at the music. I found everything. I just spent time on the things that I found easy. So when I got to my early mid-20s and I felt like everything was falling around me, it was a real struggle. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I'd never experienced that kind of failure before. So if you can, try, keep an open mind, try things that you're not good at. You never know what you might learn along the way. And it really is when you step outside your comfort zone that you will learn the most. You'll take those risks and you'll learn so much from it. And you might not fail. You might absolutely fly and succeed. Either way, it's a great outcome. So definitely try your best to put yourself out there and do things that you're not particularly comfortable with. So just wanted to summarize the things that I've said. The comparison factor, just look at who you are. And also sometimes we can compare ourselves to our past successes, as I just said. I found that very difficult. So Just remember, what you do next is what you make of it. And there's so much out there in the future to come, and so many opportunities. I hope you think of that as an exciting thing, as well as something that might be a bit overwhelming. That second point around getting to know yourself, understanding who you are, and I put beautifully unique, because we are. Again, the great thing about being human is that we're not all the same. We're all completely different in different ways. So make sure you start to get on that journey of understanding where your strengths are, where you want to spend your time and your energy. It will really pay off later. Thirdly, not having all the answers. And I defy any leader or someone at the end of their career who has all the answers, even at that point. So no one's expecting you to have them all now, certainly. This is a great time to not have the answers and ask the stupid questions. Please do it. You've got free rein at the moment to do that. The traits that I think will serve you well around flexibility, learning agility, and being easy to work with. No matter where you go in your life, and no matter what career you choose, those are transferable skills to any career, any industry. So if you can think about focusing on those when you're doing that learning around who you are, then that will stand you really well. And then that last point about failing, making mistakes, learning, do it early and do it often. As I said before, if you can start getting comfortable with that now, then the rest of your career will be a lot easier as you understand what it takes to tumble and pick yourself back up. It won't be such a difficult feat for you to manage. And with every mistake you do learn, you get stronger. It'll give you great lessons for yourself for future, and hopefully for others along the way. If you become someone who mentors other people, who leads a team, those kinds of lessons are great for you to pass on to other people as well and have impact in that way. So I want to wish you all the best of luck with it. It is a journey, and you're at the beginning, and it's really exciting. And in some ways, I wish I was back there, and in others, I'm glad I'm not. But I think it's a great time. Things in the world are changing constantly. Opportunities are coming up constantly in ways that we would never have expected. So I just go back to that point about flexibility and agility. If you can master that, then you'll be ready for anything when it comes to you. I wanted to touch on some resources that might be helpful for you to look at as you move forward, and that reference some of the things that I've spoken about today. So in the top left, you see that colourful wheel and some reports with some other colours on them. They're just examples of some psychometric assessments that are out there in the public domain. Some of you who go through grad programs, maybe you've done them through your studies, will get the opportunity to experience some of these assessments and some of these tools. I've just highlighted two that I'm accredited in and that I use a lot, and I've seen them in corporates, very popular. So the one on the left of the three different pages, that's a strengths tool. This one is from Gallup, and I'm an accredited coach with Gallup and their Strengths Finder tool. You can buy a book, I think, for £15 about how to find your strengths, and it'll give you a code that you can then redeem online to get your top 5 strengths. If you wanted to spend a little bit more, I think it's £50, you can get a full list of 34 strengths. Going through that exercise changed my life. I can't tell you. And again, a bit later in life for me, but once I found out what my strengths were, I realized what made me unique, what made me different. And I really leaned into those strengths and started to use them in work, asked for opportunities to use them, and just thrive from there in a way that I've never felt before. So I'm a really big fan of finding out your strengths and really using those in whatever walk of life that you're in. The circle, the colourful circle with some words in each of those corners, that's called insights. And it's based on psychology that many tools are based around. So if anyone's familiar with Myers-Briggs, it's a similar kind of methodology. And that's something that I'm also accredited in. And it's just a way of learning more about your preferences, not just at work, but outside of work as well. And when I coach people around this tool, they often tell me about how useful it's been with their children, with their other half. with their family members, their in-laws, just a way of understanding what our preferences are, what other people's preferences are, and how they interact or not, how they can clash. And when you get into the workplace, you will see immediately how this is really useful. And you can get to understand other people in a way that you probably haven't thought about before. If you've studied psychology, you're probably a little bit way ahead of the game on this. So these are things that I'm a big fan of, and variations of these you might find in your life after you graduate and after you get your jobs. The book there about how to fail by Elizabeth Day, brilliant. She's got a podcast as well. She's an author and journalist, and it just takes you through all of her experiments and how she's failed in life. And it's just a really nice way of summarizing and going through someone else's story about where they've gone wrong, but where they've learned from it as well. And it's something that we often think we don't have the chance to do. We don't have the chance to fail. We're going to look bad. We're going to look vulnerable. People will judge us for it. And I think the more that we get comfortable with it, the more successful we'll be. And then that phone there is referencing a great podcast and book by the guys at Amazing If. So started by two people who had full-time jobs and did this as a side hustle. Big fan of side hustles. They started this kind of concept about squiggly careers. And it's that point that if you look at a career, we used to look at it as a ladder, but now we appreciate that they can kind of be very up and down and sideways and squiggly. And that podcast is incredible. So simple, but I'm just nodding along every episode that I listen to. So I really recommend you having a look for their work as well. It will be really helpful as you enter into the world of work, but also as you go through and up the career ladder. And then I've just put a couple of QR codes on there. So the top one is if you want to learn more about me and my career on LinkedIn. That's my profile. You can see the kinds of companies I've worked at, mainly kind of professional services. And then in the bottom right is my coaching website. So I work 4 days a week at an insurance company. And then on Fridays today, I do my own private work. And part of that is coaching and running sessions like this. So if you want to learn more about me and what I do, those QR codes are there for you to have a look. And I'd like to conclude my monologue there, give people a chance to think about what questions they might have, and I'll hand over to the team to see what's coming through on the questions.
Hi, Catriona. Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I've just graduated myself and not quite sure what to do. So a lot of that was really hitting home for me. Yeah, let's move on to the pre-submitted questions that we've had come through. So we've had a question come through from Paul, and he wants to know, when did you know what you wanted to do career-wise?
So I think I've covered a lot of that in my presentation, so I'll just recap. First of all, when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a performer or an actor. Then again at 22, I knew I wanted to save the world, and that was my path. Then a few years later at 25, 26, that's when I found my flow in the sort of learning and development side of HR, and I'm still there now. But as you can see, I'm pivoting again, and I'm doing private work as well as being fully employed. So I think the next 5-10 years, I'll probably be doing something different again. So different points of my life when I knew what I wanted to do, and I still anticipate more of those chapters and pages being turned as we go through.
Brilliant answer. Yeah, more thinking of how there's different things that we need to do at different periods of our life rather than one thing that we need to do for the entirety of our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we've got another question that's come through from Imogen, who says, I'm going traveling in January for 6 months ish, and I'm worried about getting a graduate job after. Should I be looking and applying now, or should I be not too worried?
So, well, first of all, don't stress about anything as much as you can. Stressing is not going to be helpful for you. So I would encourage you to look at the recording from the last session that was very specific about grad jobs, and there were some similar questions about travel. So, my sensible answer is that definitely look around before you go traveling to see what kind of jobs that you would want to apply for, and then what's involved in the application process. So when and where do you need to be present for interviews, etc., and when do they want you to start? So if that's not going to match up with your plans to travel, then there's not much you can do apart from wait until you get back. Jobs are available all year round. Obviously, graduate schemes are at certain times of the year, so it really depends on the kind of job that you want to do. My secondary answer is work is always going to be there. You're going to be working till probably longer than I'm going to be working till. So I would say it can wait and just go and enjoy your travels. If you can't travel now, it's going to be a lot harder to do it when you're older, trust me, when you're in the middle of a career. So travel now, work later. That's kind of my initial reaction to that question.
Brilliant. That's the advice I need to hear. Travel now. Before we move on to the next question, just want to add, please feel free to drop any questions and comments that you might have in the comment below. Just make sure you're signed in with a Google account so that we can get round to that one for you. We do have another question coming in from Hannah. Here we are. What is the best advice for mature students who have a lot of experience but not in the field they want to go into now?
So the first thing I'd say to you, Hannah, is that you're probably in a much better position in some ways than your less mature graduate fellows, because a lot of the worry from younger grads is that they don't have enough experience. So you're already in a unique position that you've got a previous life and you've got experience. It may not be in your head directly related, but I would argue that there will be some transferable skills for sure that you want to highlight. And actually, if being on the hiring side, I've seen when I worked in graduate programs in a law firm, worked with trainee lawyers, and I saw graduates coming through who are in their second career. They were amazing. It was brilliant to have them on board. It was lovely to see people with confidence, with skills in different areas and different ways of thinking, because they'd had that life and they'd had that career before coming to this. And obviously it's takes a certain amount of humility to then sort of start again. So for me, as someone who would be hiring someone like that, I would love to see you as a candidate on my shortlist. Because I know that there'd be great things that you can bring to the table. So what I would say is make sure to focus on those things. Like, again, what makes you unique? What are your strengths? What are you going to have that somebody else doesn't? And make sure that comes through when you're interviewing, when you're applying for jobs, because I see that as a strength rather than anything else.
Thank you. Yeah. And then we also have a question from Charlotte, who submitted it before this session. Is there more value in doing something you're passionate about over something that pays well? What do you think?
Oh, great question.
Yeah.
It depends, Charlotte, what your motivator is. So for some people, the money is a motivator. It's how they measure success. It's how they measure confidence. It's how they measure skill. And for others, that really doesn't float their boat, and it doesn't give them the motivation to get up in the morning. So, people work in finance for a reason. They love it, and they love seeing the figures, and they love the different kinds of work that comes with. And there are other people that much rather think about what they enjoy doing. So that passion that you've mentioned, it can bring you so much more energy as well. So I've been in jobs where I've been drained by the work because it just hasn't fed into my passion. And I'm honest and open about being not money minded. So I'm not really there for all those zeros at the end of my paycheck. Obviously it helps to some degree, but there's research to say at what point, the value of your salary actually doesn't give you any more joy and happiness in your life. And it's at that point that I think you can really start to think about, well, what does make me happy? The other thing that I would say is look at your free time as well. So what are you spending your hobbies doing? Is that the area that you can be passionate about, that you bring your whole self and you find yourself really excited to be in that space? There's a lot of sort of work out there, books out there around, maybe you won't find your passion at work, and some people are using the 9 to 5 to pay the bills, and it might not be 5 days a week, it could be less, and then using your free time to be looking at those other things that you're passionate about, and sometimes your side hustle can turn into your full-time role and your full-time job. So definitely explore what it is that you're passionate about, and give the money a go, give the passion a go, and see which one you get most from.
Yeah, I guess it all ties into kind of a discussion as well about like mental health and what does keep you going in the morning. And for some that might be money, and that's okay. But for others, we
Absolutely.
need to find that thing that gets us up and going. Yeah.
And I've worked in financial services a lot, so I've seen how the money motivates people. It's not for me, but I see how it might, and there's no judgment there on what motivates you. And I think it goes back to the point around know yourself, because if it's your motivator, then go for it.
Brilliant. We have another question who's come through from Emily. Do you recommend using personality questionnaires to identify potential career paths?
Very controversial, Emily, probably more than you know. So I've seen, because I work more on the development side when people are in their roles rather than the recruitment side, I'm an advocate of using these tools for development. So thinking about your skills, where you can change, do better, have more impact, get better energy and be more passionate, more than dictating or predicting which career you should go into, to a degree. So having said that, I know a lot of companies do use them as part of their recruitment process. I'm just not about pigeonholing people, and I think everyone's flexible. Human beings, we're all flexible. We can all adapt and change. So I think it's useful information for sure to think about what your potential career path might look like. Certainly, as I said before, what motivates you? How do you prefer to work? Is it with people? Is it on your own? I think those kinds of things will definitely help you identify what the right, maybe not career, but the right kind of role is for you. But I know that there are some out there, some that I'm also accredited in, that predict performance in a role. I can't sign up to that. I really can't. So I definitely, if you get the opportunity, they're always good to learn more about yourself and to use it as a piece of data along with other pieces of data that you have, that you know about yourself, feedback you've had from family and friends, etc. Gather it all and think of it all as a lot of data that you can use then to think about what's right for you.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful way to approach it, the way you mentioned as well, saying treat it as a role rather than a career, because then I suppose you can look at what skills and strengths that role needs, and you can then seek roles that then match, like you said, the data that you've learned from maybe a personality questionnaire or from just reflecting on your own. So yeah, it's a good way
absolutely.
to
If I look at where I started, I wanted to perform and I wanted to help people. That was the kind of acting, and then it was the charity. And I feel like working in HR, certainly in the learning and development side, I stand up in front of people, I deliver training, so that's almost my performance. But I also feel like I'm helping people as well in terms of helping them with their career, helping them with their management and their leadership. So it might not have been what I thought was the thing I wanted to do back then, but I can see how those kind of different elements that I enjoyed, I'm now bringing together in a different kind of setting.
Brilliant. And then we've got one last one from Nick, a last pre-submitted question, who wants to know, how can I learn from others what I am good at?
Ask them, Nick. It's very simple. Just go and ask people. There's again, I'd probably do a bit of a Google search, but I've seen lots of websites that prompt you the kind of questions that you might want to ask people. And I've done this in the past as well. Just gone out to the people that know you best, that can be honest with you. If you've already got a job, you can look at the colleagues around you who you know the most and who you trust. But if not, then go to your nearest and dearest, who will give you warts and all probably feedback, to say, where do you see me thrive? What am I good at? Where could I improve? What do I need to work on? It's those kinds of questions that are interesting for you to answer for yourself, and then compare perhaps with what other people are telling you. And again, there's quite a lot of some of these assessments you can do free online. So I would definitely look at those as well. That might give you more of a sense of where you are and who you are. So really the simplest thing is just to go out and ask them in whichever format you feel most comfortable with, whether that's a conversation or an email or a text. But I think it can be a bit of a weird question from a friend. So you might want to make sure you position why you're asking, what you're trying to do, you know, what your motivation is around the questions. And then therefore a bit of a agreement on, you know, I want you to be honest and I want you to give me feedback on X, Y, and Z, because it's really going to help me identify how other people see me.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. Well, and it may seem, like you said, a bit weird. You don't have to necessarily approach your friends with like a full questionnaire on what am I like for them to answer.
Yeah.
But I suppose it is best to get to know yourself through the eyes of those who you're around the most. So yeah, definitely like talking to people about what you are like to work with to build upon those interpersonal skills.
And Nick, great question, and great that you're thinking of it as well, because a lot of people don't want to go out there and seek that feedback. So if you can start doing that now, again, you know, brilliant that when you get into jobs later on, feedback is harder and harder to come by the further up your career you go. Never stop asking, Nick. Brilliant. Never stop. Keep going with those questions.
Oh, brilliant. That's it for the pre-submitted questions. We haven't had too many questions come in live. If anyone does want to, I urge you to just pop it in now. We've got 1 or 2 minutes left to go. Before we close up, I do have a question of my own that I hope it's okay to ask.
Go ahead, Sydney.
Just because you were talking a lot about traveling and how that really helped you decide what your strengths were and what you wanted to go and what you wanted to do. It seemed like a really formative experience for you. I wanted to ask, for those interested in international opportunities, what's the best way to go about finding those opportunities? And do you have any advice on avoiding the idea of volunteerism? There's been a lot of talk recently amongst students about maybe companies that can take advantage of that student desire to go abroad, and it can end up doing more harm than good. Is there any way to go about seeking those in the right way for those who do want to do some good?
I mean, to your point, like absolutely, those experiences I've had, you know, in very developed countries like Australia, France, less developed countries like Peru, they're amazing to just get you outside of your usual reality and see what the world is like for other people, what life is like for other people. It gives you different perspective on a lot of things. So that's my first thing around travel. Absolutely a big tick for me every single time. And as I look at other people around who've not done that and they wish they had, I think that's an awful regret to have later in life, that you never did it and now you feel trapped and you can't. So that was my first sort of reaction. Secondly, I think obviously you probably want to do a bit of due diligence around the kinds of companies that you might want to invest in and spend your time with, those that do send you abroad and give you those opportunities. For me, it's about pragmatism, and if you feel like you are doing some good at the end of the day, then that would be my motivator. So whether that comes with a little bit of other stuff, let's put it that way, other noise. If you feel like you're making an impact, then I think that should be your guiding force. But definitely research the kinds of companies that give you those opportunities. Talk to other people. What have they done? Who have they gone with? What have they heard about X, Y, and Z institution that's giving you those opportunities? You know, it's great that people want to have that impact and give back. And as I said, it can really change your life actually, and you'll meet so many different kinds of people and could send you on a different path. So I would definitely just do your research, and again to that point around, use your network. So use now with me, you know, again with the internet and everything, you've got so many ways of figuring out what these companies are about, who's done those opportunities before, who's experienced it, and what they have to say. So nothing should be hidden anymore, I would say. If something's happened, if there's a story there, you'll find it. So definitely use, again, all the data points that you have, whether that's online or with real people that have had the real experiences. Just find out as much as you can.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Yeah, traveling is something that I'm really passionate about, and it is, this volunteerism idea is something that you do hear buzzing around on student campuses nowadays. So it was really good to hear about that from you, about doing your due diligence. Yeah. Well, thank you, Catriona. And thank you to everyone who submitted your pre-submitted questions today. We really appreciate it. And I'm sorry if there were any pre-submitted that we couldn't get round to. Yeah, thank you so much, Catriona, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And just want to say, again, good luck to everyone. Grab every opportunity that you can and enjoy the ride.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today on this stream. I want to remind all the graduates and students on the stream today that there's plenty of career support available at the Careers Service. And we'll be sending out a recording of this and lots of useful links and details about how to get in touch and to book an appointment with us in the following days. We'll be asking everyone to complete a feedback form as well in the next following days, so please do keep an eye out for that. And I'd just like to say thank you for attending, and thank you so much for Catriona for giving up her time to be here with us today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.